So I think we can start. I'll just start by introducing AIBE before we begin with the panel. Thank you guys all for joining for AIBE's Fifth Speaker Series. Just to give a little introduction as to what we are the world's largest nonprofit student-run summit. We were founded in 2016 by students at the LSE, and we've branched out now to include students at Oxford, UCL, King's, and other universities across the UK. So our aim is basically to democratize AI and make information accessible to students and professionals alike, so that, you know, not just professionals, but also people like you and me, and students can have access to the latest innovations in the field, and we can kind of take part in discussions regarding the ethical implications of AI and the way in which it's being applied across business in the private sector and in the government alike. So this year, AIB kind of focused on government policy and trying to establish itself as a platform to translate these ideas into policy. So we've been hosting multiple speaker series during COVID, as we haven't been able to have our in-person summit as usual. And so this is our fifth event, and we're very lucky to be joined by this prestigious panel. And before I hand it over to Philip, Bertie's going to introduce our moderator for the panel today, and we really hope you guys enjoy it. Thank you.
Thank you, Anya. Great introduction as always. Just some rules or just some information before we kick off. If you guys want to ask any questions to Philip or the panel in general, then just use the Q&A function at the bottom. Try to avoid putting questions in the chat. I know it's kind of easy to do that, but try and put them in the Q&A and they'll be more likely to be answered. And yeah, to introduce Philip, for those of you that don't know him, he is the startup program leader for OVH Cloud in Northern Europe. And for those of you who don't know who OVH Cloud are, they're Europe's leading cloud computing business and the third largest web hosting provider in the world. They've got a commercial presence in 5 continents and are, you know, one of the most exciting companies in this space. So we're very lucky to have him here, along with the panelists today. Philip's been working with startups for 20 years in VC, technology transfer and business incubation industries as well. And he's got an amazing panel with him today. So we're very lucky to have them all here. Over to you, Philip. Thank you.
Thanks, Bertie. Thanks, Anya. Yeah, brilliant to be here. I attended the AIB Summit last year, and it's great to be back again for a second year. Different format this year, but well done to the team for pulling off a unique format under the current circumstances. Yeah, so as you heard, I'm heading up the startup program for OVH Cloud in Northern Europe. And yeah, we are a leading European cloud provider, and we can offer global scalability through our 32 global data centers. And also as a European leader, we can also offer data sovereignty, which gives our clients and their customers peace of mind in terms of GDPR compliance and things like that. Also offer great price performance ratios. And this kind of leads into today's topic, because when we're talking about AI, it means the use of GPUs, and they're very power hungry, and that has an environmental impact. But yeah, we can talk a bit about that more later. But as a startup, the best way to tap into our benefits at OVH Cloud is through our startup program. And we have 2 startups from our program on the panel today. The first is ToffeeAM, and we have Audrey Gaymann from ToffeeAM. She is the Chief AI Officer for ToffeeAM, and they are applying AI in the engineering industry. Then we also have MyCare from our program, and representing MyCare is John Wall, who is a co-founder and Chief Innovation Officer for MyCare, and they're applying AI in the healthcare industry. And then we've also got Michael Boham, who's founder and CEO of Skillsize. And they are a startup applying AI in the human resources industry. And last but not least, we've got Sherin Mathew, who is the CEO of AI Tech North, as well as the Innovation Exchange. And he is an AI community strategy and ethics expert. So welcome to the panel, and great to have you all here with us. Very excited to be hearing from you about what's hot in AI and how ethics is guiding your journeys in terms of AI and the products and services that you're delivering to industry. But before I hand over, to hear a bit more about what you're up to, just some context in terms of what's hot. There are so many solutions out there to, for startups and businesses in general to deal with data and AI. In terms of our startup program, where we offer a free access to cloud products like, for example, GPUs to train models. I just see engaging with startups, they use such a variety of different solutions depending on their use case. As a result, we launched a platform as a service in 2020 to provide a solution dedicated to data and AI. And there, one of the trends that we picked up on was the convergence of tools to simplify and democratize the use of AI. And so we provide access to a suite of popular AI libraries like MXNet, TensorFlow, PyTorch, Torch, Fast AI, and Hugging Face. That's a popular NLP library. And that's, we see that kind of resonating with startups out there and simplifying their access to AI. But yeah, I'd like to now hand over to the panel to hear a bit from each of you about what your business is, what your focus is, and how you're using the cloud and AI. Sherin, will you kick off from the panel?
Thanks, Philip, for the lovely intro. Hope everyone can hear me. So as Philip mentioned, I'm Sherin Mathew, founder and CEO of AI Tech North and Innovation Exchange. This is a new entity I'm going to just introduce, which is called Public Intelligence. But to set the context, AI Tech North is a community set up in the north of UK. It's probably the largest AI community and running for the last 3 years. And our mission pretty much is very much aligned to what all this AIBE and all this conference is all about, is to democratize AI and lower the barrier of AI adoption. While doing so, we realized the biggest challenge is how do we amplify the knowledge? How do we share strategies? How do we reduce the mistakes and failures? So we thought, instead of running physical events, we thought during COVID, let's digitalize this. So Innovation Exchange was one of our knowledge platform that just evolved as a byproduct of our community running for the last 3 years. So Innovation Exchange is free access to expert-led knowledge, strategies, lesson learned, just so that we can bring awareness across ecosystem and reduce that wastage of repeating the same mistakes or same, failure steps. So how can we sort of, empower everyone with reusing the knowledge and strategies? While we were doing this, interesting discovery happened accidentally, which was ethics was a common, interesting, and hot topic. And every year we would talk about ethics, but it will end up in a bit of not a dead end, but the big question is, how do we physically embed ethics in a design process or in an AI application? And even with thought leaders from large corporate brands, it kind of became a hanging question. So we thought, let's take this a step further. And we did a year worth of research. and we started pulling up stats, facts, data. The data went all the way from colonization to industrialization to globalization, and how information era started to sort of grow eventually over the last decade or so. So when we put all of this together, we came up with a very powerful framework, according to us, and we discovered something quite interesting, which was most of the ethics problem could be solved by one principle, which is right to intelligence. And we started to sort of work on this framework. And in 2 weeks' time, we are about to go live with an open AI framework, which helps in an ethical and with the design thinking approach. How can we physically embed AI in any application and AI process? So to answer the big question, what's hot in AI today? I think it is answering this question: how can we be ethical? And we have an interesting perspective about this, and happy to sort of share that even further. If I'm allowed to, give a bit more about what public intelligence is. Public intelligence has overarching 5 principles, and we have taken this initiative to sort of put this forward to public and make it democratic, which means you can actually go vote, like, comment, and sort of support this physical framework going forward. And the framework has, like I said, 5 principles, but the underlying principle is: how do we protect human intelligence and capability from being displaced by intelligent, innovative systems? What that means is respecting people's intelligence first, which means we're embedding people-centric approach or human-centric approach right at the heart of the design thinking process. The next part of the principle, out of the 5 principles, is being purpose-driven, which means how can we augment people and innovate something that actually solves an unexplored and unaddressed problem, and ensuring the new innovation or AI can add value to people and to the planet. The third principle is: how do we manage the disruption? How do we prevent disruption? And how do we manage the displacement? The fourth one is risk evaluation. So we know anything that we do today, events or running a business or constructing anything or even launching a new car, every business does a full, thorough risk evaluation. Why don't we do that with every AI application that goes out there live? So we use pretty much the same philosophy and put a really nice risk evaluation framework around it. Last but not least, we have the final principle that wraps everything around this guidelines, and it's called accountable redesign. When I say redesign, it's really ensuring that if there are applications already out there using AI, when they do their next release, can they ensure they have taken all the framework or principles and this as a guideline or as a non-functional requirement, and they have corrected the AI model, or they have ensured there's no bias, or they have checked for bias or for the risk that they may not have factored earlier. And at a very high level, we got 5 principles that sort of goes in circle and kind of fixes things in a way. So yeah, super excited to sort of take questions and stuff like that from you guys. Thank you.
Thanks, Sherin. Audrey, do you want to start off for giving us the side of the startups?
Yes, so thank you for the introduction. So my name is Audrey Gaymann. I'm one of the co-founders of ToffeeAM. So just to give you a bit of background of where ToffeeAM comes from and what we have achieved. ToffeeAM is a spin-out from Imperial College London. It was started back around 2015 with the work of my supervisor when I was doing my PhD and as a PhD student. So the work was sponsored by Baker Hughes, or at that time it was GE Oil and Gas. The work was based on what we call topology optimization. So topology optimization is a quite recent work which has gained quite a lot of success the past years due to the introduction and the development of additive manufacturing. So additive manufacturing is more or less what people know as a 3D printer. And what we have noticed is as we develop more and more these 3D printers, even so they offer a bigger flexibility in what we can produce as engineering component, what we realize is this flexibility is actually not exploited. We just use traditional design methods to design engineering components, which are then produced with additive manufacturing. That's when topology optimization started to get a higher interest on where science started to look towards a more mathematical approach to design the component. So topology optimization is just a big word to design a mathematical approach where the solution you design follow mathematical equations. So you don't need anymore a designer, an engineer to make the design. The design will be created by a computer based on mathematical equation. And that's what we have achieved at ToffeeAM. ToffeeAM is just a software company. We sell a software which is using generative design on AI to produce components. So we redesign for industries the engineering components. The AI introduction was more recently added inside the system on top of already the generative design using the image recognition pattern. So the thing with topology optimization is you have very complicated shapes. So the method we develop is actually very fast. It's faster than most of what other industries are using for the designing process using topology optimization. We added a new feature with AI where we managed to recognize patterns which are created through topology optimization to speed up even more the code. So this pattern recognition we have that have been developed means that we can create 100 times faster new components compared to other industries. And that's where the introduction of AI has been very important for us because for a lot of companies that do not have the resources or the time to redesign all their components, they can use this AI system to get a fast answer. So that's what we do at ToffeeAM.
Thanks, Audrey. John, can you tell us about MyCare and what you're doing with AI?
Awesome, sure, thanks, thanks, Bill. So MyCare strives to be the world's leading AI-enabled platform for older adults and carers who want independence and a better quality of life at home. We leverage AI analytically and predictively in a proactive way in order to predict possible detrimental changes in health and offer companionship and intervention to help prevent emergencies at home before they happen. So we've taken kind of combined social, medical, and then analytical AI all in one in a platform that really supports all stakeholders in the kind of care ecosystem for the elderly. So that involves interfacing and working with the elderly themselves. There's family members involved who obviously care about their older loved ones, and neighbors involved as well, clinicians, carers, and any sort of transition into a care home or nursing home institution as well. So there are lots of stakeholders involved, and we really believe that AI can be the glue that helps kind of optimize care amongst everyone involved. So we've combined an AI platform for carers and doctors and professionals, and an in-home assistive technology called MyCube. So I've got one here. So inside MyCube, we have our virtual assistant named Monica. And more than Alexa or Siri or Google Home or any of these other assistant devices, Monica reaches out to you during the day and offers companionship, She greets you in the morning by name. There's a lot of psychological research and time put into the interactions and the way that we can give back to the elderly rather than just being a passive kind of assistant. You can ask what the time is and they'll give it to you, and that's about it. So there's no relationship there usually, but we pride ourselves in the social application of AI. We very much believe that an AI business that's aligned with something that isn't money, like that isn't just the end, is the best way to do it. Something grounded in actionable results, something grounded in health, something grounded in measurable health and well-being, both physically and mentally. So we really try to be different in that way. We're not extracting data to then pass it on and sell it, and then the person involved is a byproduct or a necessary evil, the user. We form a complete feedback loop of behavior at home, actionable insights that then gets fed back to the relevant people, whether family members or the elderly themselves, and then we validate that feedback. So it's a complete feedback loop where the result is better physical and mental health. And so we've got all manner of clinicians on the team. So we have a 20 plus year experienced GP who's instrumental in integrating NHS patient health and data systems. My founder, Kelvin Samugam, was an advisor to the NHS for 20 years as well, before his father and grandmother both suffered falls at home, and he realized that all of the technology that he'd been vetting his whole career for the NHS just wasn't good enough. It wasn't where the technology is, and no one was creating that feedback loop that really drives improved health rather than just gathering data or monetizing it. So that's a bit about us. I think I'm obviously being an electrical engineer, and with my background at Stanford University and Silicon Valley, I'm a lot more technical, I suppose, and really get stuck in and translate the social needs and meeting with people and getting out there and learning a lot and translating that into the technology and kind of end-to-end creating solutions for us. So I think what's really hot now technically is, GPT-3, the new, as of last year, kind of generative conversational natural language processing AI is very interesting. You can have very coherent conversations with AI that has opinions and has kind of basically pulled together all of human knowledge on the internet in order to form a pretty convincing kind of psyche. There are obviously massive issues with that because the internet is full of misinformation and fake news and hate speech and everything. So that does come out in the results you get from it. But I think as a place to start, before we cut it down and really improve it, it's certainly very promising for more conversational and social AIs that we're obviously interested in. And then I think another thing in research and more the development side is self-supervised learning. So before, when you'd have to manually label all of your data and make sure everything's correct and spend much more time in the preparation stage before actually innovating and testing it and getting the feedback and putting it in practice, there are now processes that will self-label and self-supervise. So they'll take a lot of that process and cut it down and optimize it so that you can innovate much quicker and spend more time with your users and testing it in practice. So I think those two things.
Thanks, John.
Yeah.
Great, thank you. And last but not least, this time is Michael. Please share with us what you're doing in terms of AI.
Thank you very much, Philip. I'm Michael Boham. I'm one of 3 founders of Skillsize, and Skillsize is essentially a platform that provides AI-driven talent intelligence to help large organizations to optimize project resourcing, talent mobility, and recruitment. So to touch on a bit of the story about how we came up with the venture, my background is in management consulting. I've worked with a few of the large Big Four consulting firms such as EY and Deloitte. And what I saw in those very project-centric environments was that often the very frequent need to understand the skill sets you have available to you to ensure that the right people are assigned on the right projects. But unfortunately, a number of different situations, what we observed as all co-founders were all ex-consultants as well, was the fact that there was a lot of recency and unconscious bias in the selection of candidates. It was often, I worked with this person on the last project, therefore they're going to be involved in this project, which the kind of resulting impact of that was, compromised project outputs, loss of productivity, and also loss in engagement of the consultants because they felt that their skills weren't really valued and put on the right or utilized effectively in these organizations. So we essentially sought out to try and solve this problem by leveraging various different techniques, largely natural language processing and various different data science techniques to convert any kind of existing data sets available about those individuals. So it could be consultant CVs, it could be deliverables, it could be online artifacts published to convert those into a structured format from which you're giving the expertise distribution to managers to say, this is what your expertise profile looks like, ensure the right people are assigned to the right projects, and thereby minimizing any kind of bias involved in that selection process. We've also extended the platform towards the recruitment side of things as well, as we've developed a mechanism through which it goes beyond just assigning skill sets, but also being able to understand the nuances behind behavioral patterns and analysis based on the way people articulate themselves in their CVs. So there's a number of different AI kind of frameworks we've applied through that analysis of kind of linguistic patterns. And so that's where we are. We currently work with a number of different companies, as I mentioned, large consulting firms are typically our main sweet spot. We also work with a number of different banks and other organizations to drive and ensure that relevant skills are analyzed and resourced in the right opportunities across the business.
Great, thanks, Michael. Exciting stuff. Yeah, so we've obviously now given a bit of an overview of what everybody's doing in terms of AI. We've heard about what some of the hot topics are. Let's now move more into the ethics side of things. We've heard from Sherin that ethics is about a right to intelligence. It's about respecting people's intelligence. There really are two aspects here. It's really the ethical use of data and also AI itself. For us at OVH Cloud, ethics in terms of data means not using customer data to train AI models. So we don't touch our customer data for our own gain at all, and that's just part of our values. So that's just an example from our side. And when we're looking at AI ethics in general, John was touched on GPT, which I'm imagining links to generative adversarial networks, which is quite a hot topic at the moment, as they can be used to create new data, and therefore there's the risk of creating things like deep fakes and things like that, which obviously have risks and ethical questions. But with that as a bit of an introduction, let's go to the panel now to hear what they're doing practically to implement ethics into their products and services. John, starting with you, how do you practically implement responsible AI into your business? And how do you consider explainability, interpretability of your AI models that you use for your products?
Sure, thanks, Phil. I think kind of one of our core philosophies at MyCare is we do the most that we can with the least amount of data possible. There's certainly a push in big data for getting as much as you can and then sifting through it and figuring out what's good and what's not. And what you end up with is a massive volume of data that you might not even use. And then that's a risk, that's a liability to keep safe. You also start inventing things to do with it, which is not the way you should be innovating, in my opinion. You should really start with the needs, start with the people, the problems, the ecosystem, the sphere that you're in, and then innovate the most optimal and groundbreaking solutions from the problems. And that kind of, when you start with the problem, you figure out what's nice to have and what's need to have. At MyCare, we spent 18 months with the elderly and their carers to really understand what the needs are, to really understand what people are missing, what the pain points are, what causes the most stress, what impacts health the most. And then we really, and also took in their concerns about privacy and ethics. Obviously, no cameras. We don't want things watching us, and Big Brother and all of that. The elderly are very, very cognizant of their privacy as well. And so we really, with a few of those pillars in mind, no cameras, none of these other gather as much as we can and we'll figure out what to do with it later kind of mentalities, no move fast, break things, definitely a kind of a different approach towards starting in reality, starting with doctors, starting with the problems and the users, and then figuring out what the most kind of data lean, risk averse solution for that is. And once you kind of plan that, you can still put all your energy into innovating along that route, but you're aligned in the right way, and it's much harder to veer off and end up somewhere unethical, in my opinion.
Thanks, John. I think you've also helped to answer one of the questions from the audience was around, it's kind of your process of developing the MyCube.
Yes.
And I think you've brought in some of the aspects there that you had to consider, when you decided what that product was going to be like.
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to shift over to Michael now. In terms of that matching process that you do in your product, Michael, how do you know that what's happening there is fair when you're making that matching happen?
Sure. So this is our platform. Our matching engine has taken a good better half of 12 months to fully develop, and through that entire process of learning, we really try to model the expected behavioral patterns, or the exact kind of mind frame that would be adopted by a recruiter, for instance, and sieving through several different CVs against a job spec. And we looked at the things that they prioritized, as well as the things that we thought we should probably exclude from what we were trying to extract via analysis and matching. So to give you a typical example, so with our platform, we completely eliminate any kind of bias that can be involved in any selection process. So our algorithm does not take into account genders or any kind of demographic information such as race as well. And we really fully focus on analysis of the skill sets as presented in that particular document, whilst also cutting out the fluff, because we've realized from research, I think there's information published about this publicly as well. I'm speaking to academics. There's a certain group of people that tend to overhype and oversell themselves on CVs versus other demographics that don't. We've trained it to kind of be agnostic to that particular narrative or way of demonstrating themselves in CVs, to really focus on the skills and analysis. The other part to this play is we've fully documented all the assumptions, the model in which our AI works, how it works, and the inference engine we have. So our customers, once they adopt our platform, they're fully aware of how it's working. If it helps them make a decision and produces any kind of analysis, they kind of understand how it's derived, because they're fully bought into how our platform works. And that's really key towards migrating to an kind of an ethics-driven model for our platform. So yeah, those are kind of the primary ways in which we adopt that philosophy in ours.
Thanks, Michael. I'd like, I think a key part, it's not so prevalent in your particular solution when we look at what ToffeeAM is doing. Audrey, if you can kind of, highlight for us how you think about user intervention, bringing the human into this process of allowing AI to design products, where an engineer would normally be in control of the parameters and the restrictions in the model, but now you're kind of letting AI do its thing and come up with a unique design. How do you cater for intervention of the human and the limitations of these, you know, the engineering, manufacturing processes. You said 3D printing that you're working with.
Well, we do have two different processes inside the house. The first one is the engineers can still control the solution, because obviously a lot of the industries we are working on work on different problems. So you need to have your system to be able to adapt to the different purposes each industry has. So we work closely with this industry to understand the need. They can control quite a few parameters when they do the design. So the system, the AI, is not doing the job by itself. It still needs some human inputs at the end of the day to control what kind of output like they're expecting. And then we have feedback loop where, depending on what kind of output they have, if they are not happy, we can again modify it through the AI system. So there is like it's a work. It's a group work between the AI and also the designer. So that's one of the aspects we have inside for the in-house one which build automatically the design. The second one, which is more under trial at the moment, is to speed up the code. So this one relies on data set we are building inside ToffeeAM. So the thing is, as a new startup, we have a lot of collaboration at the moment. Industry prefer, before to invest inside a new software, they want to check what are the capabilities, what we are able to do. So we do a lot of consultancy work where we try to check the need on how to improve our data set, how to improve the system so that we have better results for what they are expecting. On our new AI system is populated with new data set which are done in collaboration with industries. So we can have better outputs which are more accurate. And we keep populate. AI is a bit like human. We get better as we get more work, or we learn more from a product. So our system keep improving by having all this collaboration with industries, which tell us what they are searching for, what they expect, and then we improve the AI as things go. So that's how this last system is done. It's a collaboration work. It's not just the AI doing their things on the side. This AI will improve as time goes, as you learn more. And also for the second feature, industry is also aware that it's suboptimal. So it will give an answer, but it's not necessarily the best one compared to the first answer. So they have to to criticize what they are getting out of it. So you still need to have a designer on the designer to check what is the output and to really think, okay, is it what I'm searching for? No, yes. And depending on that, you decide to go forward or redo what you were doing at the start.
No, that's a great example of human interaction with a system that has AI and making sure the two work together harmoniously. Thanks for that. Sherin, I'm going to go to a question from the audience now for you. And the question is, what do you think are the biggest issues relating to ethics in AI?
Ooh, where do I start? I think the biggest issue, well, there are a few, is most of the ethical guidelines and framework is, I would say, a bit superficial, and it doesn't go to the depth of design implementation and gets to the nitty-gritty, because AI is evolving, it's a new technology, we are still trying to figure out what it can do and not, and regulation is catching up. So there is that, a bit of a gap in there. So, and when I say superficial, what I mean by that is talking at a very, it's got to be fair, accountable, explainable, okay, makes sense. But how do you actually embed accountability, right? What do you mean by being people-centric? These are not answered, and this is why it leads into a bit of a confusion. We try to get to that level where, what does it really mean by, being fair, accountable, and responsible? It really means respecting, having a moral code in your design or in your AI design process or implementation. Moral code to ensure that you treating people as they should, respecting people for what they do. Example, there are many, to give you a couple. There's driverless taxis being launched and supported by Amazon, by a startup called Zoox, I think. Now, driverless taxi. Now, you got to think there is an ecosystem of taxi drivers out there, right? Working absolutely fine. They got a livelihood. They have gone through driving license, getting approved to be a taxi driver, understanding the map of the city, and they have a livelihood associated to that. So when you say being accountable, you got to think of the ecosystem that this AI application will actually impact, the risk and the consequences. So the other challenge that this just brings out is obviously understanding people's intelligence as a capability and respecting that, and also the risk that we are not currently factoring. So today's big challenge is most of the framework is reacting to what's happened. We got to be proactive. And when we say proactive, we got to be proactive for 5-10 years down the line. What will happen if I created Facebook, right? And people are going to be jumping on it and going to be on it for like hours and hours, and we're going to be tracking their behavior. So what do I do with that data? You got to ask those sort of questions now at the design stage, not after it's been launched and we've seen it after 5-10 years. Oh, AI has taken all my data. And now there's a deep fake of Sherin Mathew speaking about bad things about AI. So we got to be proactive. So I think the other big challenge is most of the framework, not trying to say it's wrong, it's in the right direction, but it's missing that depth because most of them are commercially led or corporate led, framework. Now, when you have a people-led framework, concepts such as social imbalance, securing your jobs, my future, my living, or my family's future, or my jobs in future, my well-being and everything, all of this becomes a question. Currently, they are not part of any AI framework. And AI, by definition, replaces human intelligence. Human intelligence is something that all of us on this call, we have curated over years by going to uni, getting certified, getting trained. So if tomorrow there's a new technology coming and sort of replacing this, we gotta really ask those questions. To what level? Where do we draw the line? And I think that's the challenge, because intelligence is a complex concept, and how do we draw that line? So yeah, at a very high level, these are the key challenges that we're trying to address with public intelligence.
Great, thanks, Sherin. Really takes design thinking and thinking around innovation to another level.
Yeah.
John, got a question here for you around risk. Your product to a certain degree is predicting your customers' health. Is there, are there risks associated with that, and how do you deal with those risks?
Yes, thanks, Phil. That's a very good question. I definitely agree that everything should be in the design stage. You shouldn't realize you have risks and try and patch them afterwards. So what we've done is we've designed in multiple layers and built in that kind of risk checking and validation into the design of the solution itself. So there's kind of a past, present, future, and then different levels of it. So I'll go into it. You can realize what historic trends mean for someone's health, personalized to them, and then kind of figure out where they are today from that, and then try and extrapolate into the future. Obviously, when you're estimating, there's risk involved. So we also have, in the case that something is missed or something is predicted, but there's obviously some risk involved. We also have built in, because we have this social connection with users, we have this active, personal, social assistant that cares about you. We actually have the full capability to just ask a question straight up. So whereas if you have a cold, unfeeling, passive, even assistant, you don't really have the opportunity to check in with someone on a personal level. But what we do have is, if something is detected that could be dangerous, we'll just check in with someone. How are you feeling? How are you doing? We've noticed this. Are you all right? We can do that and get qualitative response back, and again, full circle validate that solution. Also, framing, it's very important that we have the GPs on the team and the kind of psychological backing, because you don't want to cause panic. You don't want to suggest more than you actually have. So it's also very important in the framing. There's a lot of social work that's gone into how we frame these, not interventions, but these reaching out events, and how we communicate that to family and carers and loved ones of the user. So there's kind of a by design in multiple different areas to mitigate this sort of risk and prediction. And the validation is very important, getting that feedback and having it personalized to you. So I think that's how we do it. The short answer is by design.
No, great. Good to hear how the human element comes into to make sure that the right decisions made in the end. Michael, there's a few questions coming from the audience around your product, and also, AI in job applications in general. Kind of along the questions, one of the questions is, can filtering job applications really be agnostic? That it's hard to get those parameters right. It'd be great to hear your opinion on that. We've all put CVs into the system, and and wondered why we weren't selected for that particular job, and blame the AI. It'd be great to have your opinion on that one.
Interesting. So the interesting answer to that is a bit of a story. So we started Skillsize on the basis of that exact same problem. This is the prelude to us looking at the issues in the corporate space, project resourcing. The initial problem we're trying to solve was, job seekers trying to apply for jobs, and then them being faced off against ATSs or application tracking systems that often had AI bots that simply scanned across extracted keywords from your CVs and then matched them against a job spec. And then if it was below a certain threshold of success, you'd get that nice friendly email 2 weeks later saying, having carefully reviewed your CV, unfortunately, you'll be progressing this round, which is essentially the spot. So we initially sought out to give that power back to users to understand what an AI bot would look like if they were to scan your CV, and what the strengths profile will identify, your areas of weaknesses, and also potential. And we gave that power back to users, and that really, really helped us build out an algorithm and taxonomy as we have it right now, because we received quite a lot of CVs processing through this platform, job specs as well, and that really built what we have. But we've now taken it, to answer the question directly, we've taken it a step further, and then we believe that there are certain, we're starting to move into a phase in the recruitment space, in assessment selection, where you're moving beyond just, is candidate A great for this job right now? And companies are starting to look more forward, starting to be more forward-thinking with their hiring needs, trying to look at other aspects of the individual's competency. It's not just their technical skills, but also what we call adjacent skills as well. It's your soft skills, it's your kind of leadership potential. it's your capabilities, and that's almost superseding what you can do today in tomorrow's organizations. So it's, you get the job today, but what's your potential to thrive in other parts of the business? Because we're starting to see this evolution of this concept of called a liquid organization, where it's not so much, roles and responsibilities and hierarchies. It's all about skills and where there is a need within the business, which allow people with certain skills can flow into different parts of the business where there is need and where it can provide the most value. So what our platform does to go to that point of, completely eliminating the focus on certain skills and how they're represented, is to not just analyze the individual strengths as they have it right now, the technical ability. We look at the adjacent skills, we look at the potential of that individual, and we use that as almost a stronger weighting to match against a particular job opportunity. So what we give our customers or the businesses that use our platform is, right, this is what you're looking for right now. This person is, say 40% aligned to what you have right now, but there's other elements to this. They have the potential to adapt into this new scenario because they have these adjacent skills, but they have, with the ability to adapt, brings the ability to save in looking for someone that's actually has the technical skills you're looking for right now, because they'll end up being more expensive. So you can hire this person now that has potential, spend a fraction in training them up, and they'll end up being a cost save for you in that basis. So that's a long-winded way of me essentially saying that we build a platform that looks beyond the skills you've represented in your CVs, but also provides a level of potential, which a lot of companies are starting to look at now as part of the recruitment process.
No, thanks for your insights there, and also on trying to build a solution that gets around some of these problems. Being an engineer myself, I where technology is going. Audrey, can you tell us where you see the future of AI-assisted design and manufacture going, with your insights in terms of how AI has been used in the engineering industry?
AI is currently being used more and more. I'll say the only problem what we have to understand is a lot of industries are having a lot of data sets. They're not doing anything. They have a lot of experience. They did a lot of work in engineering. They built all this experience the past 30, 60, 50, for a long time. For 60 years, they have done testing, built random device. It was working, wasn't working. But all this data, the industries have them, but they're not doing anything with them. And that's where AI starts to be interesting. And why industries start to use more and more AI is because it gives them the opportunity to use all this data they have in-house on doing nothing with, on to a better purpose, which is to improve the life of people. AI, at the end of the day, is being developed by industries so that we can have a better life. That's why AI is being developed so much the past few years. You take Google Duplex, for example, a few years ago, where you have an assistant which can make calls for you. You have now in your house something like Alexa or Google Assistant, which can help you for basic tasks. People ask more and more for these devices, and that's why industries focus more and more on using AI system to improve our life. In the domain of engineering, it's all this application industries have worked on which are a base for future work, but are not being used properly. And that's where AI starts to be interesting. All this data they have created can be used to produce new component, new engineering component to improve the component we currently have. For example, if we want to make a gas turbine which use less fuel, then how to make one. And that's where all this data they have been working on, all this testing can take a lot of sense, thanks to AI. But what people need to understand is there's a limitation right now on AI and what's currently being used in industries. We don't have to see it as something which has a will of its own. The AI which is used by industries is what we call narrow AI. Why? Because they are very good at a specific task. They can't do anything outside what they have been built for. And they are the results of what the engineer have done with it. So what you have decided to feed inside the data set. And they will be only as good as the experience you're feeding inside your AI. So on the long term, we can expect AI to get better, to not be good only at one task, but multiple tasks. We can expect AI to learn by itself also. We have machine learning system, like we created one at ToffeeAM a few years ago, where it learns by itself to do topology optimization. You don't teach it anything, but just because it knows how to do the physics, suddenly it's going to try randomly certain things and start to learn how physics works, how the equation for physics works, and then start to learn how to do topology optimization by itself. Sadly, with the resources, computing resources can be pretty limited still. It's getting better and better, for example, with cloud system. That's why we are moving to cloud system for our software, where you're not constrained anymore by what your desktop can do. You have a large amount of resources on the cloud, which is perfect for engineering purposes, and help a lot of industries, obviously, to scale up and increase the computing resources depending on the need. So in the future, definitely AI will take more and more space in our life. Industry will rely more and more on it. But at the current state, it's still pretty limited. There's still a lot of work to do.
No, thanks. That was very interesting to hear kind of a broad look at how AI is being applied, and particularly in engineering, and also how cloud is benefiting your business. We're down to the last sort of 5 minutes, and I'd like to kind of wrap up with a question to the whole panel, give you a chance to give them a quick minute answer around a question that I'm going to combine with a question from the audience, which is, how do you build confidence with people using AI? And I'm going to kind of toss that question back and to say, do we need to build confidence in AI? With the audience, do they even with the public, do they even need to know they're using AI? And then to go a bit beyond that and say, we tend to get into ethics when we have failures. Before we have failures, we don't really worry too much about ethics. And there have been some classic AI failures in the last 5 years, and because of the shortage of time, I don't want to actually go into any of them. But I'm going to throw the question to you and say, listen, there's this public out there that doesn't necessarily know much about AI, but they will probably be the ones that get affected by the next failure. Have you learned anything from previous failures or your own failures in AI? And how does that kind of help to answer this question of how do we, prepare the public for AI? So Sherin, maybe you want to kick off. But yeah, let's keep it short. It's going to have to be literally 30 seconds a minute.
Yeah, I'm going to use the example where I witnessed booking a flight from Leeds to Stockholm. This was just after Thomas Cook went bankrupt. Literally the very next day, flights went 4 or 5 times the price. Yeah, and these are algorithms behind the scene that we currently say, yeah, we're okay with it. Let flight booking system track my cookie. I think when innovators are transparent that this is what I'm doing, and kind of expose that, hey, there is something that I'm using. Currently, it's all black box, and which is why people have mistrust. And we are currently and openly giving away very sensitive data. In this case, our cookies. We are giving away our face, voice, our behavior. Behavior is so sensitive and confidential data. We're giving this away at free will. We need that accountability. So anyone who has an algorithm behind the scene, they gotta be transparent that, look, I'm doing this. And that's when people will have trust on that particular technology or platform. That's my simple answer.
Brilliant, thanks, Sherin. John, I see you next on the screen. Do you want to go next?
Sure, definitely. I think, that transparency is key. When people know what they're getting back, a lot of these failures, they weren't getting anything back, right? When you go on Facebook, it's a passive experience, and then all of a sudden your data gets siphoned off somewhere and used to sway an election. So, I mean, when you are very transparent and open and understanding, especially trusting care and family dynamics and doctor relationships and all of that in an AI system, it's very important to educate on what someone is receiving in return, what are the benefits, what agreement you're coming into, what data is being used and how it's being used, what you're getting back. So I think sharing and trying to educate by familiarity is probably the way forward. If the results speak for themselves, then you won't have to worry too much about other failures because they didn't do it right, because the people and users that you work with know what the AI landscape for your product or service looks like.
Thanks, John. Michael?
Sure. So I guess with Skillsize, we're applying this piece of tech in a part of the business that kind of screams for, that has an obligation to be transparent and open to the people that work in the business, particularly when looking at areas such as topics such as diversity and inclusion. So it's almost important, it's paramount for us to reflect that in our model and what we're trying to do, so that when people are selected for an opportunity in part of the business or resource for a project, they can evidence to everyone in the business that this is why the AI recommended this person, and it's based on the principles or the ideologies or the parameters or factors we would consider naturally, but this is just done at scale and allowed us to optimize and increase efficiencies in the process. So we've essentially mimicked the requirements of that business in our platform, and that helps increase the level of adoption and, I guess, comfort with the output that our platform provides.
Thanks, Michael. Audrey, you've got the final spot on the stage. So let's hear what you have to think.
I think it's a difficult question. I do agree that obviously to be transparent on the data set you're using or how you built your reward function in your AI is something very important to avoid failure. Now, it's not going to impede it. And what we have to understand is when we have failure in AI is because some work were not done properly before. So there's a lack of accountability from industries towards their own failure and what's happening with the AI. So that's where I think it becomes important to educate the general public and to have also the government do their work on trying to control what's happening behind closed door. We can't just wait to have another Cambridge Analytica, for example. Government needs to put into place some regulation for industries, and also the public need to make industry accountable for their own mistake. So by choosing industry which are focused on spend resources on making AI more ethical or also avoiding failure. So yeah.
Brilliant. No, thanks. A big thank you to the whole panel for your real excellent participation, and thanks to AIBE too for organizing the event. It's been great. Hopefully we've managed to get to most of the questions that came from the audience. So thanks also for the audience participation. That was great to get your questions, and I think they really were on the nail in terms of this topic. And yeah, we look forward to engaging with anyone from the audience afterwards. You can obviously contact us through AIBE, and we look forward to engaging with you further. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much, Philip. That was fantastic. Thank you for helping put the panel together and for moderating, and to Audrey, Sherin, Michael, and John for sharing with us kind of what your startups are doing, not only in how you're implementing AI, but how you're implementing it in an ethical manner. So I think I can speak on behalf of everyone that was very educational and insightful. So thank you for your time. And yeah, we hope to see you guys again, maybe next year in person at the summit. And we hope everyone has a lovely day. And if you have any questions, please reach out to them individually or reach out to us and we can connect you with them. Yeah, thank you guys so much.